What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined as always by Connor Rogers. It is officially 1 month until the NFL draft as we are recording this. So tonight's pod, we're going to go through CR's latest 3-round mock for the Jets, talk some other news and notes around the team, and then we'll hop over and record a fresh war room and answer all of your Discord mailbag questions. Connor, how you doing? How you feeling? 1 month out, my friend.
It is that time of year. I feel like I just either sit in this chair nonstop, whether it's recording or watching and writing up guys. I was telling you before that we even recorded that we filed, I think, over 50 scouting reports for the Badlands draft guide already, which the fact that we filed, like edited, published in the system.
Dan's got to be happy staying out ahead of schedule. It's nice.
Yeah, that's a really, really good pace. I think we're going to cover a lot of ground this year. So everything's really good right now. But yeah, with the event coming up and it's chaos right now. It is funny to me. It just always feels so busy for the Jets around the draft every single year, no matter what. And here we are once again.
Yeah, the Jets have actually been a bit accommodating for us the last 2 weeks. I think they know how busy we're going to be in April between the live show and the draft guide.
They've
and it's
stayed
been
out
like
of the news.
It hasn't really been a lot of news, which might not be the worst thing in the world. I think it's the table's kind of set for where they're going to be at the draft, although I think we'll get some veteran moves around that weekend, still TBD. You know, we're at the time of the offseason when people are saying Garrett Wilson isn't a top 50 receiver in the NFL, and, you know, we don't have to divulge into that discourse. Instead, we're going to talk mock drafts, as that's just very silly. So, comes out on NBC today. I think we're developing a nice little collection of what I'll call Badlands guys. And I started to see that it starts at the top with your mocks, and they kind of filter down to the mocks that like the rest of us take spins at. And then I see more in the Discord, and there's almost like one in each round. Now, I think the one in particular that you took in the second round is definitely bubbling to the top, especially coming out of our draft season and bucked the trend late last week. But I was particularly happy with your first round pick. It's what we talked about last week. I think is probably a little controversial in some areas of the Jets fandom, but talk through the first and second round pick, and then we'll dig a little deeper there. And then we'll talk about the third round pick and some of the other late round guys who I think are getting in this circle of the Badlands guys, I'll call them.
Yeah, it'll all tie together too. And if you want to read the full thing, if you're interested in just how the picks actually fell across 101 selections, truly deranged work by myself here. It's on NBCSports.com. It's 3-round mock draft, and I did a different format where rather just go and pick 1 to 101, like I just bundled all the teams. I think that's easier to read. Realistically, 90% of the people reading, they're like, I want to know the 3 players my team got. Okay, here are the 3 players, and here's the write-up about all of them, so you actually learn a thing or two about every player. The first pick was Tyler Warren, and this is no surprise. This is the most commonly mocked player to the Jets at 7. It's funny how it is now almost against the grain to like the idea of taking Tyler Warren at 7.
Yeah.
I have a
this
couple
happened with Bowers last year, too.
Yeah.
Like it was enough weeks of talking about him, then it's like, whoa, you're taking Bowers? That's crazy.
It felt like this is such an obvious pick. And now we've gone full circle where people are just looking for someone else. And now when you go back to this everybody's like, oh, really? Tight end at 7, Warren at 7. I think the way I'd package the people that are turned off by this pick or really just when they see it, they're like, can't do that. They look at it as a typical draft, and they're thinking tight end, 7th overall pick. Like, you got to get better value. I would counter that in saying, 1, not all drafts are created equal, and this draft is certainly not created equal, specifically to last year. The talent gap is just jarringly different. So that's really, really important, where Warren in this class, to me, is probably around the 5th or 6th best player in the draft. And the reality is, you know, players 11 and on is like, it's getting there's a big plateau where everybody starts to feel the same for a long time. So you want to try to get a great player, no duh. 2, I think the way we look at tight ends has become very, very foggy. I think for a tight end to go this high, Bowers was a special wide receiver as a tight end, special in a way that there's not really going to be many of him in our lifetimes as a pass catcher. Or you have to be really good at both things. And Warren is really good as a pass catcher and really good as a blocker. He's not special at either, but he's really, really good at both. That's why Bowers was a justifiable selection if they wanted to take him last year and where he went. And then you look at the history of it, like, why do teams miss? Well, maybe they're just good at one thing and you hope they're going to develop in the other. I think Dalton Kincaid's actually been a little bit of that for the Bills. He's not a special enough receiver to only be receiving tight end. So, and of course, I think the big counter to Warren is, and why I enjoy writing 3-round mocks specifically in these scenarios, is if you just do a round 1 mock draft and take Tyler Warren, even if people love the player, and there is a lot to like about this player, I think DNA-wise, he is the perfect player for this new era. Everybody goes, well, what the hell are we doing at right tackle and D-line? You know what I mean? And a couple things. One, even after I did all 3 rounds for the Jets have a lot of needs, and it's problematic. No matter, it's like musical chairs. No matter where you go with the selections, they are either going to have a glaring need at wide receiver 2, a glaring need at D tackle, a need at another safety, a need for a tight end, a need for a right tackle. They have 3 picks in the first 3 rounds. You are going to not solve everything. And that's if you hit on the picks, which is really likely you don't hit on all 3. So, but landing on Warren at 7, it's easy. We've had this combo, Joe. Like, it's really, really easy. He is the one pick that elevates both your pass game and run game. And you have to evaluate him here as the number 2 pass catcher in the offense right away, and a guy that not only helps the tackle you could park him next to, but also helps the run game, which is very, very important with Justin Fields under center. So Warren, in terms of talent, is a very, very viable selection in this spot. And, after that is where you start to put the puzzle pieces together. Okay, how are we going to actually form a full football team now?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with Warren in that 3-down player is, I would say maybe Brees ends up being second on the team in targets, but Warren has a very good chance to have that spot. Can Angstrand see the sort of St. Brown Laporta duo combo and do the same thing with Garrett Wilson and Warren? Right. And if you're young or mediocre at right tackle, you feel a little better if Warren's there. And like you said, the Jets are going to run the hell out of the football. So having Warren be able to block and also be part of the offense you're going to need to run with Fields, it's a good fit across the board. And I think the floor is particularly high with this guy. Right. It's hard to see him not be productive right away and be a centerpiece on this offense along with Garrett and Brees. And, there's a decent chance that, Membu seems like more of like the chalk pick now, but he may not be there at 7. And he's not a player without questions. We'll talk about this a little more in War Room, but, is he being overvalued? Is this like another Ekwonu situation? Should they be looking at Campbell? I don't think it's as cut and dry where it's like there's this slam dunk right tackle that is going to plug and play and be like Olu is likely to be at left tackle. It's not
great call. I will be the first to tell you, I don't think Membu is as good of a tackle prospect that Olu was. Like that, it's probably not very close, honestly.
Yeah, and I think people, I get it, are kind of like, well, this is just like Bowers and Olu. It's not. It's a different 2 players. It's a different draft overall. I do feel from a mentality and a culture standpoint, you can see Warren fitting very well into what they want to be on offense, especially in this 1 to 2 year, potentially Justin Fields vacuum. Maybe it ends up being longer. Maybe it ends up being shorter. It's too early to tell. We go to the second round, and we know the Jets need a defensive lineman, right? Now, one thing that you've preached is that this is a very deep class on defensive line. The guy you have them getting is a guy that I feel like, I'm guessing from our draft guide, could potentially be the number 2 overall interior defensive lineman on the board, at least from Dan and Meagh's POV when they were discussing him. Who do you have the Jets taking in the second round? And is this a plug-and-play starter, a name that I think you're going to hear a lot on the Badlands feed the next 4 weeks, let's call it?
Tyreek Williams, he's definitely become, it's like a folk hero at Badlands. We do this over the years. For those that are new and those that aren't, a little reminder, you could jump in with some names here, Joe. Trey McBride.
Yes.
AVT.
AVT?
Garrett Wilson. AVT and Garrett Wilson were both like Badlands folk heroes. To a lesser extent, Jermaine got some of that pub, and there's been a ton of players over the years. But there's also guys that just haven't lived up to their status. Ekwonu, who's been way better for the Panthers, but hasn't been one of the league's best offensive linemen, like we were kind of hoping he would be. Obviously, we talk about deeper cuts, though. But, like Badlands folk heroes, where leading up to the draft, you really, really want that guy, and you think it's an obvious fit for the team and a good player. Tyreek is my third ranked overall interior defensive lineman, which will be above consensus. Like I have him above Walter Nolan and Derek Harmon, where consensus, when I say consensus on this show, means all the other draft rankers and media and maybe even the league. They'll have Nolan and Harmon ahead of him. I only have Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant ahead of Tyreek. He is an A-plus run defender. Like he is so stout against the run where you saw teams starting to realize they just got to figure out something else. They stopped running near him. Because of his power and size, there's more meat on the bone as a pass rusher. Do I think he'll ever be a difference-making pass rusher? No, but I don't need him to be. I just need him to be an adequate power rusher that is, honestly, like I really watch him play, and I'm like, I think he could be one of the league's best run-stuffing interior defensive tackles. I really think that with him. But this is a loaded class, and everybody wants these freaks like Nolan, maybe even Harmon, a more up and down the line of scrimmage guy like Shamar Stewart, who's more of an edge but can play inside, where you might get a good value on Tyreek. And he's the perfect player in this front, responsible player, would really fit next to Quinnen Williams, and is kind of this one-man demolition that like you just kind of drop his ass right on this defensive line. And you're like, run defense looks a lot better all of a sudden. Like he's big, where Sherwood and Quincy have more room to run around. So this was a no-brainer for me, and not only a favorite of mine, but somebody that I think is very realistic at pick 42.
I feel like a couple other names. I remember Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey, Pratt last year, quarterback was a name we were talking
Great
about
call.
a lot.
Yeah.
Some of the
Creed Humphrey.
Round,
oh man, John Michael Schmitz was a bad one. Like that.
JMS.
Yeah, that was a bad one. By the way, also I try to follow some trends or what these guys have had. The Lions, like the Lions style of offense, you can't replicate that without the two-way tight end. So you have to have like Warren's a dream. You look at the Lions defense, Aleem McNeil in the middle of it, who got a huge payday from them. Tyreek Williams. Like you need these kinds of guys to do what they want to do. And they haven't even sniffed those areas in free agency, which tells you they think they can get it in the draft.
It just looks so much better if you have him and Quinnen like leading this thing off, starting next to each other. Then Nandi, it's like, okay, he's fine as like your third D tackle rotating it off the bench.
Right.
And
Leonard
Coward's
Taylor's
fine
the pass
as your
rusher.
fourth. Yeah. You got Leonard Taylor. Coward plays 10 snaps a game. It's like, all right, that kind of looks like a little more normal. And then maybe you grab like a late round edge to go with JJ and, WMD, and like you round it out there. Now, the third round, we're back to Tetris here. And I wasn't surprised to see you do this. I like that you did it because we're still fighting the good fight for one of our original draft gems, where I refused to I was laying in bed last Thursday and I randomly just tweeted how panicked I was that Chugs is going to turn into Wayne Hunter 2.0 because I wasn't watching March Madness and I wasn't watching the Severance finale. I was stressed about Wayne Hunter and Chugs potentially being the Jets' right tackle, like a true sicko. And I just can't shake that out of my head, like worried about reading quotes in like July. Like, no, he started 50 games. We feel good for him. He's our guy. He's been our guy since we signed him. Reminds me a little bit of like the Carter Warren stuff at the beginning of the offseason last year. Like Carter Warren's going to be our guy. It's the Max Mitchell thing. It just, I get worried about it. Now, if we go the route, or the Jets go the route that you recommend in the third round, because it lines up value-wise, it creates a very clear situation to shuffle some pieces around that get the 5 best offensive linemen on the field. So talk through the strategy and the potential value of the player you got the Jets getting in round 3.
So something you have to remember with mock drafts, especially somebody like me that does them